Ulf, could I ask how long you've been doing bow work, and then also if you're okay sharing, how old are you?
I'm 56, and I started up violin making and started to glance at bows in the mid 80s.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I've been employed for some time in the business in Malmö, and then I also run my own business since 94 full time, 93 full time.
Okay.
6 years of electric engineering.
Okay.
A little bit tired, but now I'm back again since 2014.
Okay. Well, the pictures of the bows you post are absolutely stunning. So,
yeah. Thank
you. And is this young lady an apprentice or your daughter, or would you introduce her, please?
It could have been my daughter, but
yeah, yes. I'm his apprentice since September last year. So I've been not 1 year into the bow making, but I did 3 years of violin making in Belgium first.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Very good. Let's see. I'm going to switch screens. Let's see. Chris, John, Alessandro, and Aitan. Welcome back.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Well, many of I have met in person. I know who you are. We've interacted with, on the various groups on Facebook or things like that. Tony, are we waiting for anybody else?
I think. Let's see. Hi, Janelle. Jacob. Mitas. Midas.
Okay. Should we just start having a discussion? Okay.
You can just start.
Well, thank you everyone for joining and taking time out of your day, morning, or night, wherever you're at, to join us. And a number of people on this session were with us in the last hour where we talked about tools and things like that. One of the things that I really have been trying to do is work differently as I've gotten older, so it doesn't hurt. So this session, kind of in a way, a continuation of some of the discussion we had in the last hour about tools. But what I want to talk about this time and discuss with everybody is as I go on into, I'm into my third decade in this career. How do we prolong our bodies? How do we take care of ourselves and do what we do? So thank you. Several of you guys have shared. I got my start in 1986 in the shop. I was a teenager. I grew up working violin repair. I later went on and focused specifically on bows. But one of the things I've always done is lots of herring. And this year at the end of the summer I turned 50, and I've had thoughts about using that as a turning point in my business to not do rehair work anymore. That's just an idea I've had. It's not for certain, but part of that is this jar represents about 9 years, and this is the part of the bow rehair that comes out of the frog. Okay, over 10,000 bows in this jar. Okay, and that's I've been rehairing bows for 33 years now, and that's 9 years worth right there. Why I collect stuff like that, don't even ask. I have no answer. but the problem that I began dealing with a few years ago is I was 44, and I thought I had a nerve in my thumb. It turns out it's arthritis. And boy, when the doctor did that, it was, it was, it took me a while to kind of come to grips with arthritis. That's something old people get. But no, I'm dealing. So every day I have to remember to do things differently now, so I can prolong the health of my hands. And so I've really been trying to focus on different techniques. Specifically, I try not to hold things so tight. The hair, the thread, or the various things that I do in a rehair, because that tension in my hands and in my body and my shoulders, that after more than 30 years of doing it, has taken its toll on my body. So, yeah, that jar represents a lot of income, mortgage payments, kids' birthday presents, but it also represents my body breaking down. And so I really have been trying to think of other ways and watch other people do things and modify my tools to take the tension out of my body. So that's kind of the introduction that I wanted to lead off with. And what we do is very intensive, especially to our hands and our wrists and our elbows. Career violinists tend to have rotator cuff issues because of their bowing. As bow makers, we tend to have issues with our wrists and fingers. So I wanted to have a discussion and maybe some ideas, talk about ideas and things that we are each doing to counter that tendency to hurt ourselves. One bow rehair doesn't hurt, but at the at the end of a day where I've done 14 rehairs, my hands hurt, and so that's really kind of what I wanted to lead off. But so any comments on that before we kind of get into any ideas? Anybody have anything to add? Looks like most of you have the mic muted. So if you want to speak, go ahead and unmute. Good morning, Janelle.
I can add something, I think. Those of us who started as performers first, possibly. Don, you said you're a musician, and I know, Anthony, you are. I think I benefited from the fact that I had an instructor who studied at Juilliard with Dorothy DeLay and Ivan Glamian and all these, and even Nathan Milstein. So I was brought up learning how to play the violin with the least amount of tension, the least amount of effort. And it takes a lot of self-reflection to be able to understand that while you're doing something, that you are absorbing all the actions that you're doing while you're doing it. So I guess to start it off, I would just say, I think I have a benefit in that while I'm rehairing, while I'm doing anything, I'm thinking, am I doing something too much somewhere? Am I holding this too tightly? Am I putting too much effort? Because when you're playing the violin, which I'm a violinist, and I was a professional violinist, I still am. I was just, before all this coronavirus stuff popped up, I was on tour with the New York Opera Company for 3 weeks. So while I'm doing things, I'm actively thinking, am I tensing my shoulders? Am I doing something stupid while I'm doing this? And I think that's one of the benefits to actually have had professional training as a performer, is that it's just part of what you're doing when you're playing, is how can I channel all my efforts into what I'm doing the most efficiently and effective way. So maybe that's something that that as we're doing our work on the other side of the fence here, maybe that's something we can do, is just think while I'm working, am I doing something stupid? Am I holding my neck at a bad angle? Am I tensing up my shoulders? Am I, is my back not straight? Am I sitting in a chair that's just dumb for what I'm doing? There's a lot of things I think you can take into effect while you're working. So that's what I would kick this off with on my part.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else have anything to throw in?
So Chris, while I completely agree with that, and when I started off working on bows 15, 16 years ago, I approached it with the same mentality. And, it's very much like being a musician, always looking for relaxation. But I find, as I do more making, that, I do things with more tension. And so it's more of a question, especially to the older people in this group. Is it just a constant self-awareness and self-assessment? Or does something need to change, or what?
Well, I would say what I've learned is there are parts of our business, the parts of the things that we do, that just simply require attention and effort outside of what you and I as performers have to do. Mm-hmm. And that's my workaround, is when I have to do something that I know requires force, requires tension. I mean, even simply, pulling the hair between my fingers as I'm rehairing a bow. I have experimented with how much tension do I need to put between these two fingers, because before I was like clamping down like and working it like crazy, and I've experimented with, okay, what if I do it very lightly and then I do the rehair and see how it comes out. Every part of the process I'm kind of reassessing, because I'm 47 years old and I'm starting to feel it, so that's, I don't know, that's just kind of the idea. My teacher was very much a part of, my violin teacher, I should say, was very much a part of everything should just be natural and totally feel comfortable and all this kind of stuff. The truth of our business is we have to do things that are not natural and are not comfortable. And all I'm trying to do is apply at least what he taught me into making that less damaging to my body. Did that answer your question, or did I go off the rails?
No, it's great. And that's just, like I said, opening it up for more discussion on that topic is, looks like Vito. Let's unmute Vito.
There you go. All right. Well, I've been doing rehairs like, not as many as Josh has done, but, I always try to improve something in the process, even, after so many years. But the tension to me is like, is very measured. It's just like a musician would be. I studied martial arts too before, and I know that you need to put tension when tension is necessary, release when it's not necessary. So there are moments that you really have to pay attention to, pressure. When you're combing your hair, you can do a little bit more, enjoyable for a few times. And then the last time you really, be a little bit more, diligent and so on. But, I have tried to always improve the process I learned in the beginning. So smaller things, and you pay attention to, like Chris was saying, you just pay attention to certain things. You try something new, but I think I have arrived at something today. But I still got like cuts on my fingers from pulling too many of those thin strings. So I have to solve that problem.
All right, thank you. Anybody, any other comments?
Well, let's go Wolf first.
Go ahead, John.
Janelle had her hand up.
Oh, didn't I? Okay.
Ladies first. Let's see.
Go ahead, John.
I think you're muted, Janelle. Can you unmute yourself?
Looks like she's having microphone problems. So go ahead, John. And while Janelle's figuring that out, go ahead.
Well, I also started out as a musician first, and even though I try to apply the same things like relaxation to making bows, I must confess I was really surprised how hard it is for the body to do bow making compared to playing the violin, at least for me. So I wanted to just propose something that I changed because I felt very quickly that, for example, playing the stick at a desk, sitting, was not a very comfortable position for my back. So for planing, I made myself a desk that is much higher, and I do it standing. Because when I make the frogs, I'm obliged to be sitting. I cannot do this standing. But planing the stick, you can do standing. At least I find it nice. And then I have some change in my day. So I'm not sitting all the time at the desk, but I do some things standing, some things sitting. And if there's anything I learned from playing the violin, it is that if you do the same thing over and over again, it will hurt in the end. So if you can do different stuff during the day, it relaxes your body and puts less tension on the same parts.
Excellent. That's very good.
You know, I agree with that completely. I have a bench that is height adjustable, little crank on one end, and for different jobs I can raise and lower it. And I did for a time work. Well, my master's degree is in higher education administration, so I worked for a university and I sat at a desk all day, and I had more back and knee problems doing that than I've ever had since moving over into this industry, because I rehair standing up. I do a lot of my work standing up, and I only sit down to sort hair.
Oh, no, I think
Or so I find that being able to stand up.
Oh, Chris, you froze for just a moment.
And you're muted. Go ahead and unmute.
Sorry, I thought I finished. Where did I leave off?
Where you were standing when you rehair.
So I find, I guess, since I said that a couple times, I don't know where I left off, but I'm just saying I find that standing while I work, and I sit when I sort hairs or whatever, or pull out the nasty hairs or whatever, and I sit when I do restorations, but I find myself working standing up a lot, and since I've been in this industry, I've found much less problems with my back and my knees because I'm standing while I work.
Very good. Thank you. Janelle, were you able to
No.
no? Do you need to give your computer permission to use the microphone or something?
You can chat too. You can type in the chat. No. What?
All right. Okay. Well, while she's figuring that out, has anybody here? I have myself, but has anybody else worked with a physical therapist on issues? Anybody? Okay. Zach has. I'm sorry. On my phone, I have flipping back because not everybody's on the same screen. One of the things, I call this my Darth Vader hand. One of the things that I've worked with specifically for long rehair days is the physical therapist. She actually had me take my rehair bench into her office, and she watched what I was doing with my body, and she had suggestions on certain things. Sometimes it was something I could do, other times it was not. But one of the suggestions that she had was put an anti-fatigue mat on the floor, which is simply a a high density kind of a foam mat. So when I'm standing, there's cushion under my feet. So that was one thing, because I do rehair stand up. But the big place where I was experiencing problems was right here on the knuckle, because knuckles are meant to bend this way, but the way I was holding tension, it was pressing on the side of the knuckle. And so made this little thing for me that kind of just keeps all that in alignment. I don't wear this every time, but if I'm doing a long rehair day, I will use this, and it prolongs, you know, this and Advil help. And I don't really do it much anymore, but I used to go off on workshops and weekend players and do anywhere from 15 to 30 bow rehairs in a day. And you know, I don't, there's one workshop I still go to that I do that. I had to stop doing that. But using
I'm gonna stop for a second, Josh, and say I watched you rehair 66 bows in 2 days at one of those things. So you're being a little bit modest.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I don't do that anymore. It hurts, and you know, you make a pocket full of money, but then you pay for it in the end. And so, with the physical therapist, about every once a year now, I will get, I don't remember the name, it's not cortisone, but it's a non-steroidal injection into a couple of these knuckles. Because as a rehair, it's these fingers on both my hands that take the brunt of, you know, all the work and all the tension. And so for the last 5 or 6 years, about once a year, I'll go in and I have a series of x-rays that show the progression of arthritis in my hands. And so I'm kind of keeping track of how it's progressing, how fast, and I'm really actively trying to combat that so I can still work in years to come. So, you know, Chris made a comment, a couple others, you know, one of the things on my workbench, I'm sitting at my workbench. One of the best investments I've ever made is a good office chair that has a pneumatic adjustable height. Because there's times I want to be lower. There's times I want to be higher. Like if I'm planing a stick, the angle, John was saying he planes standing up, and I still sit down when, but I need to be a little higher than when I'm working on a frog. So a height adjustable chair to get the angle in my shoulder appropriate is a huge part of my shop tools. And you know, for years I've been blessed with eyesight that's very good. A few years ago I started using, you know, drugstore reader glasses, and then just in the last year I now have one of these things. So as I've aged, I'm trying to work, and when I first started using the Optivisor, I had too strong of a lens, and so I was all hunched over, and of course that brought in tension in my shoulders. And now after a couple different lenses in that, I'm at a more natural height or working distance, so I can actually use it without being uncomfortable. So these are the kind of things that are really, you know, I want to still be those in 25, 30 years. But if I keep doing these things that I've been doing the last 25 years, I wouldn't be able to. Let's see. John, were you?
Well, I was just asking if Ulf could maybe make some comments about this, because I spent a week in his workshop and he showed me a lot of stuff that he does specifically on how to do it less, to do it better for your body.
Who was that you worked with? I'm sorry.
Ulf.
Ulf. a week with me, and sorry, Jon, I can't remember actually what details we were talking about that could help. Could you refresh my mind, or shall I take another topic that I find interesting in this discussion?
Please take another topic. I'll remember for that later.
Okay. Anyway, I think you come with really nice ideas, and the physics of the body is of course a lot of balance and a calm using it, and the power to be moderate, just the right power that is needed. But I also think, for my part of it, is I do have a body that sometimes get kind of inflammations, and that comes from, for example, more stressful situations, periods in life. It could be, for me, I do love coffee, for example, and I do know that coffee affects my stomach to also produce infections in my body and my joints, and so forth. I like beer as well, but maybe 1 or 2 beer a week for me. Just find a balance that works for me. I find that these kind of informations do help, or this not helping the body for keeping healthy. Do I express me all right for you? Anyway, so I try to keep this coffee and beer or white bread, for example, as little bit lower consumption when I know that it's affecting my body, but I cannot be without it. That's for true. But that's one point I would like to lift into this discussion as a complement to all other nice ideas of physics.
Thank you, Ulf. That's a very critical part. Is the health of what we actually eat and consume. Because that I mean that's what powers our body, and yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you.
Okay, can
Annette,
people?
are you with us?
Yes.
Oh my gosh!
Oh, very
It
good.
is awesome. Okay,
Thank you.
hi everybody. Yeah, everybody's been saying such great things. Thanks. It's great to hear what people have to say about this, because I think that, yeah, a lot of people aren't thinking about their techniques of, you know, like all of a sudden I realize I'm doing something like Chris was saying, like hunched over or something crazy, but also like seating for me, I think a lot of people know, at least at Oberlin, that I'm like obsessed with ball chairs, or like, you know, chairs that keep you kind of moving, or like you need to balance yourself while you're sitting in them, because it's like easier to relax, and then also to when you're working, you're not as tense, because your whole body is kind of more aware of what you're doing. But I definitely find myself like hunched over like that as well. But also Jerry was talking about with tools, like I had like a little pick that I was like trying to pick out things with, and he was like, just make a nice big handle for that, you know, because like the less small stuff, you know, like if you can use a bigger muscle group, or use a bigger tool handle or something like that, you're not using all the small little intricate parts of your hand. You're using your back, you're using your arms a little bit more. So I don't know, that's something that I think about a lot. Yeah, and I just kind of wanted to add that in. And also like bench height, yeah, you were talking about like standing while you're doing rehairs. I think that's great. I had a friend, I go down to Eugene and do some rehairs down there, and he has a bench that raises up and lowers down, which has been great. I realized that I could really utilize that for certain parts of rehairs. And so I think it would be great to get one of those for myself, because it's like, if I can get it to a higher place for when I'm doing a certain action, and then I want it lower when I'm cutting something against the side or whatever, I think that's kind of a fun idea. But like yeah, tools or specific chairs or specific heights of benches that people like. I'm like very interested in that as well.
And I would add to that combination with a bench lamp or a lighting source as well.
Yeah.
I find part of why I scrunch my body is because it's dark or I don't have the right angle of light. I mean, sometimes you don't want too much light because it washes out what you're working on, but having a lamp that you can position and put light where you need it is a critical part of the bench, the chair, and the lighting. It's all a combination of that. So good.
I guess I also have a question because I'm kind of a beginning bow maker. I've been doing mostly restoration and rehairs and stuff like that, and I'm just curious about when we learn a certain technique, it's hard because you're like, oh, this is the way to do it, but there are many ways to do things, and also like get the same, if not better, results sometimes, and be better for our bodies. So I guess like I'm curious about specific actions that we do that hurt us. You know, you're talking about rehairs and things like that, but like just planing down bow sticks. Like I know my body gets like pretty fatigued right now, probably because I'm pretty inefficient at it. But like like my plane holding hand is like, just killing me by the end of doing a couple sticks or something, and like crossing my body when I'm doing it, like I've tried like different things, but I guess I don't know if there's anyone that can give me some examples of ways they've changed their techniques of doing things like that.
That's exactly where I wanted kind of this discussion to go, in that direction. So that's a perfect lead in. Ulf, you go ahead and unmute. Oops. There you go.
Okay, here I am again. So one thing that I use when I'm playing, for example, is this kind of bicycle gloves. Really a lot to keep the hand in shape while doing a lot of training. That's one tip I have now. Okay.
Yeah. One of the things I struggle with, Janelle, was I spent time learning bow making under Benoit Roland, and so we grip. I'm going to switch over. Yeah, we would grip the stick and pull it into the side of the workbench and plane that way. And it's still how I do it today, but it does induce a lot of tension this way. So I've started. Here we go. I've started making little things like this that screw onto my workbench that the end of the stick can kind of rest against, so I can push into it without gripping so much tension here. Janelle, another thing, I mean, we've got these beautiful bow planes, but I want to put like a knob or a tail on it. So especially the smaller ones, where instead of all this finger tension here, I want something that goes back into my palm that I can use without as much tension in my fingers. I recently bought another set of these when Jerry Pasowitz was making them, with the intent to modify them. And I mean, this, here's a couple old squirrel tail planes that I use. This one's actually an inexpensive Chinese made one I got off of eBay. But just something that goes into the back of the palm really works. But yeah, I have little things glued onto my workbench. I have this that I can screw on it to take that tension out of my hands when I'm planing. That's a very good point. I wanted to show and talk a little bit about frog making as well. But before we do that, any other comments on holding or planing the sticks?
Yeah, Vito, go ahead. We'll unmute Vito.
Yeah.
Oops. Hold on, let me see. Oh, I'll unmute you. Hold on. All right. Unmute. Okay, go ahead. Try unmuting yourself. We can't hear you. Try unmuting yourself.
Better?
There we go.
There you go.
One thing that I do with my, this type of French planes, I've, before I studied, proper French technique, I used to hold my planes like this too. But in this style, always I seen they put their finger in the front part, so it's much harder to do. I have the same set of planes that Josh was showing. The larger one, you can do it. That was made by Bob. But if you put your finger in the front part here when you plane it, it really gives you a lot more, stability and the pressure on top of the stick that is necessary. So that it was a game changer for me for tension on my fingers when I'm planing with, especially the rougher part of the bow with the bigger planes. This is, to me, it was very interesting.
So you find more pressure with your finger in the front. Does it take the pressure out of the palm of your hand?
A little bit, because you're basically putting a lot of the drive into that finger too. You're not driving so much with everything else. You're driving a lot with the front finger, and
Okay.
It really helps quite a bit.
Okay, excellent. Good suggestion.
Yeah, I like to maybe at some point we can show some of the things we use, like, people have mentioned chairs, maybe we can have some ideas of, this would be better. I have like a set of, nice little magnifiers that can focus at different distances, which has helped me a lot. So maybe we can do like a show and tell at the end, and offer some ideas for people that are looking for solutions like that. So.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on comments to add on planing and holding the sticks?
Yeah, one of the things I like to do is just use a clamp and clamp the stick to the bench, off the corner of the bench. It's really easy to reposition. Only when I'm doing like the early stages of rough out, when you got to do a lot of planing. After that, then it's standing or holding it, at the edge of the bench. But I find that just even clamping it to the bench is quick and easy, and with the cam, you can just easily loosen it and then go again,
Okay.
Well, I could maybe add to that I, even in the final stages of the planing, I also clamp the stick sometimes so you can actually do it almost until the end, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
And do you find, John, that takes the tension out of your hand? Instead of holding the stick, it just takes tension out of your hand? Is that why you do that?
Yeah, and also you can, even if the stick is cambered, if you clamp one end to the bench, you can press it down, and this way you can also use different planes for the final stages, because when the stick is cambered, either it's sometimes difficult to do the planing with a really small, with a bigger plane. So you sometimes need to take the smaller ones. But like this, you can really press the stick down and also take some long strokes with a bigger plane, which can be more relaxing to the hand.
Okay. Thank you.
In my experience.
Thank you. One of the parts of bow making, we touched on this last hour in tooling, but one of the parts that I have very specifically changed the way I do things is the approach that I do frog making. I was taught to hold it in your hands up against your bench block and chisel the dovetails, chisel the things. You've got the little slot in your block and everything, and yet you're holding and pinching and pressing up against the bench block. And I found I was struggling with that, and both in the pain in my hand and also the accuracy of what I was doing. And so maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I started doing things a little differently, and it was a process that took several years to kind of redefine for myself. And I was taught after you rough out your frog blank and fit a ferrule, then you put in the curve on the sides. I don't do that anymore. I leave it square, and I do the cheeks on the frog very last now. I'm going to reposition my camera down to my bench so you can see what I'm talking about. And this video, this is a little show and tell, but this is a system that really helps me now in how I make a frog, and it's more accurate, and it's much less tiresome in my hands. So give me a second. So this is a pretty standard bench block. You hold it here, and again, I was taught to when you're doing things, you kind of hold and you work this way, or you've got the little slot over here, and you can do whatever you need to on the sides. And so I've been using that for years. But what I do now, and this is an adaptation of what jewelers use. There's a mount right here on the front of my bench, and this is actually what it looks like, is this dovetail shape. This is something that can be clamped, but I've got one permanently screwed here. And I use this. This is available from a company called New Concepts. It's their bench pen. And it just sits right in there. And it's very solid. So for frog making, I now use a little vise with a quick release that just goes right there. And so when I start with a frog blank, I can just put it in there. I can rotate it around. If your grain doesn't cut easily, you can flip it around and cut the other direction. You can work on the ends. It doesn't take a lot to tighten it. But what I found is leaving my blank square until the end allows me the control and the ability to cut the channels and the things as I need to. Things like just in all the ways we can hold it. So that system with this clamp has really taken a lot of the burden out of my left hand, trying to hold that thing so tight. Other things, like this is a vise. Again, this is a Bergeron jeweler's vise, and I added a quick release. This is what I do button making on when I'm filing the octagon facets in a button. This same, I mount my 4A on it. So this is a really versatile thing. And when I need to go back to my block, I just lift that out, and I drop my block back in it, and I go. So that system has really taken a lot of pressure out of my hands. I was talking in the first hour session about this, and I'll do a YouTube video or something, a little video posted on Instagram, something showing and explaining what these are. But once I changed the order of steps in making a frog to keep it square all the way to the end, I'm making better frogs now than I did 15 years ago, not just because I'm more experienced, but because I can hold it better. And it's something that has really changed the way I do things. And it's a very simple system, but that's one example of the things that I've done. People have asked me, they'll see pictures on Instagram or something, what is that vise? And so again, I can put together a very specific list of exactly what these pieces are for you. But frog making has always been hard on my hands. And especially, filing silver, you get these little cuts on the edge of your fingers when, from the burrs on the edge of a silver ferrule or something, and holding the little pieces of silver while you file it. I actually bought a shear a few years ago that I can cut straight lines on a piece of silver with minimal waste. And so it took away the need to hold these little pieces in my fingers and file them. So again, it increased my accuracy, but it also just made it a little easier for me to do some of these things. So any thoughts or questions or anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think it's easier to hold large things than it is small things. So it's kind of like using an engraver's vise, where they've got the big balls that sit in a base that you can manipulate to do the frog, for example. I just use a vise.
Like that?
I just use like a machinist's vise, but it's a lot easier to hold on. This has weight. It's a lot easier to hold on to while I'm working than it is to hold on to tiny things. Just like a jeweler's ring clamp. Yeah, exactly. And
this is the jeweler's vise that he's talking about.
Yeah, that's a great tool because it has weight, and then you can manipulate it with your hand, and it's a lot easier to hold on to than a little frog. Same thing with holding tiny pieces, just even a simple chuck or a ring clamp. It's a lot easier on the hands to hold something larger than it is to hold on to a tiny piece of pearl or such. So I think the idea it's easier to hold larger things than it is a tiny frog or a tiny piece of metal.
Do you use that ring clamp for doing like what about eyes, like filing pearl eyes or something like that?
I have, but I've been buying pearl that's like pretty close to size, so just a few file strokes by hand. But if I am doing something more that I have to remove more, I will do. Sometimes I'll use the ring clamp. I think it really just depends on the scenario. Sometimes I'll do it in the lathe, with sandpaper, to bring it down to size.
Yeah, Janelle, as far as eyes, I even keep just a little power drill next to my bench, and I'll glue a pearl eye onto the end of a dowel, and I'll just sit there with a file and run the power drill at an angle to bevel the pearl a little bit and let the tool do the work instead of, working with a file.
The best tool I've seen is Rodney Moore. He's got a lapidary. So it's what jewelers use it, but it's for putting it's like a faceting machine. You would use it on diamonds, and it's a diamond plate that rotates, and you can literally he would take just a scrap piece of pearl and make an eye to the right dimension in like a minute. It was not fair. They are quite expensive machines, so I generally look on eBay to see if somebody's selling them pretty inexpensively, pretty cheap, but a lapidary would be the easiest. Yeah, let's see. What has Josh got here? What's that?
This is a dental drill that I had an attachment made for my that clamps to the milling table on my Shoreline. What I do is I'll take a drill bit and I'll glue the pearl to the end of it and chuck it so it's spinning, and then I can come in with my milling table with a bit in here and come in exactly, and I can change so the back of the pearl is ever so slightly tilted in, stuff like that. Again, for years I've filed, pieces and things like that. And this is something that I just began to use here a few months ago. I also have a dental drill I keep on the side, of my workbench. These are air powered, by the way. You see the hose, so I have a small air compressor in my shop. But for years and years, I've been using this when I do tip plate replacements, and in a matter of 30 seconds, this little carbide bit pulls out the material that from the mortise as as you glue it on and things. Like any tool in the shop, if you misuse it, you're going to screw up what you're working on. But I've used this in rehairs. We all are blessed with cheap bows that have glued in plugs, and so especially Vito, I love the bows from your company, but all too often plugs are glued in, and with the bone plates that are very brittle, if you try to pick them out, you'll chip out the bone. So this is what I reach for, and please, that's I totally I have a lot of respect for your bow.
I understand, and I actually have worked on that. I think you probably haven't seen it in the last year and a half or two.
Okay.
Something come through because I fixed that. Something I worked with them in Brazil was
Good.
the geometry of the mortise, the geometry of the plugs. I said, you guys have to fit a plug that you don't need to glue in. So
thank you for that, because for so many years, the plugs were the full depth of the mortise, and if you got your little pick in there trying to pick it out, the bone would just shatter. And so whenever I'd get one of your bows, well, any of the Brazilian bows or any of the Chinese bows that have the ingrained plugs, in just a matter of seconds, I can dig it out. I can cut it out with this tool. And so again, it takes pressure off my hands. It makes it more quick to do. And then I again, same thing I use with Pearl. They're just these additional things that are not traditional, but they really help kind of, they're really cool too, but they really help what we do.
So that was a dental drill, you said?
Let's see, let me go over here. There we are. Yeah. And again, I can send you a message or put some, but this is a tool. It's a dental lab technician. The ones that they actually use for fillings tend to have an angled head, but this one on the warning label right there, it turns at 400,000 RPM. So this is definitely one of those tools that makes you think of a visit to a dentist's office. It has that high-pitched whine, and especially when you're cutting out mammoth ivory, it smells like a dentist office. So but yeah, I've been using this for years, partly because I do see a lot of inexpensive bows with glued-in plugs.
John, what's the difference between that tool and like a Fordham tool, like the Fordham with the
flex shaft?
I was about to say it's important to note that tool that Josh has at 400,000 RPM, the standard like Dremel tool spins at about 30,000. So. Yeah. One he's got obliterates everything it touches.
Yeah. Fordham tool. That was actually one of my first tools. I had a flex shaft. I've sold it years ago because I never used it. But part of the flex shaft, the handle is much bigger, and then it's connected to this pendant motor, and it also the bits that fit into it were. Like I think 3/32 inch shank. This as a dental drill, that's a 1/16 inch shank, and I can get much smaller bits for it. And I mean, here's the bit. So, but yeah, so this is like a supercharged Dremel. But if a Dremel is all you have, then with a flex or a Fordham tool, those work those work pretty well. I do have, for my mobile reherring, I have a little, it's called a micromotor, and it turns at about 40,000 RPM. But the handle is about that big around and that long, and so it's much more awkward to use. But yeah, this is a kind of tool that you have in the shop. You know, I bought it originally to cut out the ivory back when I was actually still using bone and ivory on tip blanks, and then I actually use it more on digging out plugs and stuff like that. So
just piggyback on, you can find electric dental drills on eBay for around $70 that spin around 40 or 50,000 RPM. That's what I have on my bench because I can't afford Josh's setup. It's a little bit pricey. However, what you'll find is with the lower RPMs is if you're cutting in the direction that the bit is spinning, it tends to take off on you. With Josh's drill, you just have so much more control.
Yeah, this will cut through ivory, it'll cut through bone, it'll cut through silver, and it's very spinning so fast and with such a small bit, it does not grab, like Chris was just saying. So where the Dremel and the Fortums do tend to do that. Yeah, so I didn't intend to go into all of that on this session, but those are tools that I use. A couple days a week I do rehairs at a violin shop, and I have one of these there with a small, really noisy air compressor. And every time I light it off, the owner of the shop goes, "Oh, there's your jackhammer," to get out the glued in plugs. So, but it's much quicker than digging with a file or a chisel. All right, where does that leave us?
Well, I can say I did notice recently Matt Neukos just posted on Facebook the fact that he got some kind of really cool looking chair that makes you balance yourself. If you need
the 360 chair.
Yeah. So that I think was something that I think is related to what we were talking about. I'm not familiar with that chair. I thought it was interesting, but I also wondered, how can you be, stable? Like I don't want to be rocking around, but at the same time, it feels like the idea of that chair is putting yourself where you are rocking around, centers your core or helps your back. But how does that affect your work is my question.
Well, I talked to him a little bit about that chair recently. I have yet to hear his feedback about it, but I've actually tested out a chair like that. A cello teacher here got a chair like that for playing cello. And I do think that there is a lot of core action going on when you're sitting in a chair like that, and it's good for certain things that you can if you need a mobility with what you're doing, but if you need like something really stable, I think, Matt was talking about just switching out his chairs when he needs a different kind of chair. So I think it's good for certain things, definitely like bridge carving or, things like that are a little more freeform where you're not as locked down. But I don't know. I think I'll talk to him about it and get back to you on that. But yeah, I do think that it is good for certain things and not for others. I mean, same with my ball chair. I can't, if I need to have a lot of leverage, I usually switch my chair out, or if I just need a different height. So
okay, that makes sense to me because I was like, I couldn't see that as an all-purpose chair. One thing I will say is I made a fortuitous mistake. When I ordered a new chair, and it's just an office chair, and I don't use the back. I never attached the back that came with it, but I accidentally got the one that's the extra tall. And when it came in, I was like, oh man, what the hell did I just do? But I've actually really enjoyed the fact that its lowest position is actually quite tall. And like I said, I have an adjustable height bench, so I just adjusted my bench to that. But I think sitting too low has caused more back stress to me than having something where I'm actually on something that's pretty high. So I don't know if that will work for anyone else, but I can just say I made a mistake that I think ended up working well for me. So
That's interesting, Chris, because most jewelers' benches. We were talking earlier in our first session about a lot of the work I've been doing with jewelers. Most jewelers' benches, I think they're 34 inches tall. I think is the standard. And my chair that I normally use is actually upstairs. My girlfriend has been telecommuting from my kitchen table upstairs, so I put my chair up for her to use. But my chair is actually a jeweler's height or a drafting height chair where it goes higher, not as low. So I totally agree with that.
I got, I use one that you can rock back and forth, but not sideways. And for me, it's great because I can do this motion when I'm actually have a chisel on my hand and the frog on the other hand. And it's a simple design. I can show you guys what it looks like.
Oh, and you make bows with that chair, Vito?
I do. And I actually started to say, I like it so much. I start, on my computer when I need to work on my computer. This is the only thing I use. I mean, I've been losing some hairs in the front of my shins because of the shin pads, but I'm always upright, and I have no back problems. I think avoided some of that, and I like the ability to actually rock forward and backwards a little bit with it. It's not adjustable height, but I do not use adjustable benches, and I do my rehair sitting. So that does help me a lot.
Zach, we haven't heard much from you. Do you have anything to add?
No. This is all great information. I'm loving seeing other people's setups and realizing I need to change some things. I'm sitting on a little adjustable stool that's not very comfortable, but I can change the height of it, when I'm working on different things. And I'm always trying to improve my setup and adding blocks underneath my bench and taking them back out. Yeah. Not stuck in one way of doing things, When I started, I love the way the French do a lot of things, and I admire their wine and their art and their bases, and I thought I must make bows in the French tradition, and there's only one way to do this, and I'm learning that that's not true, and maybe finding the easiest way to do it is a good way. So.
All right.
I have some questions, to discuss possibly about vision. I'm starting to get, I'm not quite as old as some of you guys, and maybe it's stress related to COVID or diet related to COVID, but I find that my vision is maybe not as sharp as it used to be. And so I've started using the Optivisors, but how do you guys maybe cope with just vision and aging in this business with vision, because over time vision will degrade?
Oh, Vito's got the bug eye glasses. I got a pair of those too. Vito, you need to unmute.
There you go. Yeah, I really like these. I mean, those are great for, you can adjust the focus separately on each eye. There you go.
This is what Vito's got. It's max
the detail. Exactly. I really like them. It takes a little bit of adjustment to do, adjusting to, it's like stereoscopic look almost. Yes. I really like these. I use them a lot. It took a little bit of time to get used to it, but you can adjust the focus to the distance of the work that you're using. So.
Okay, that was my question. How is the focal distance? I find so many of these visors and so many of these things, you end up working with something 2 inches from your face, and it's very frustrating to not be able to work at a normal distance.
Yeah, this one is called the detail. You have to be careful you don't get, there's another one that's for watching movies from far away. So it's not gonna work for you or going to a concert, you know. But it's called detail. And you can adjust to the distance of the work. Actually, you get the distance you want that's comfortable for your hands and your bench. And then you can adjust, you know, both sides. And I really like them. It's you know, my vision has gone like Josh was saying. You know, I think it was around 2010. You know, I was working with Charles Aspie, and he said, you know, oh, you should do this and that and the frog, and I do it, and then he goes like, weren't you listening to me? And I go like, what do you mean? And then he gets his glasses and goes like that on my face, and I go like, oh my God. And that's when I realized I needed glasses. You know, you don't really know you need them, you know, until somebody, you know, and I don't go to the doctor or optometrist. So my eyes were going and I wasn't noticing it. That's it. And then, you know, it was like, and since then, yes, glasses all the time, you know, detail work. And I was missing by a 0.5 millimeter. You cannot miss by a 0.5 millimeter on a frog. You can't.
Right. I've seen these glasses on Micromark that have interested me, and I haven't bought them because I think they run about $80. But they have a lens system that slides, and they're beveled, and you can actually adjust how strong they are with little dials on the side. And the two lenses just slide together, and they're thicker, so that while you're doing work, you can actually kind of change. Because I find, you know, when I'm just like these glasses I have on right now, they're nothing at the top. They're somewhere in the middle, and then at the bottom they're like 2.0, whatever that means. Whereas the glasses
diopter probably.
Huh? What's
That's
that?
probably diopter, which
Diopter. But the glasses I have at work are like 2.5s, and they're my bench glasses, so I use them, you know, because I'm mostly doing detail work all the time. But I've wondered if anyone has any experience with those Micromark glasses that have an adjustable diopter, I guess.
Sound interesting, you know.
I don't know, though. I have not used those exactly, so I can't comment on that. But the thing that I've noticed, a few years ago, I got a cheap pair off of eBay. Used them once, threw them away. Other things that I've used, the thing that I've noticed, the biggest difference is the field of vision. You know, what it is that's magnified. Like on the real inexpensive ones, you know, that you have this little spot that's this big that everything else is out of focus. And so I found myself swiveling my head trying to find that focus spot. These are the tried and true Optivisor, and why I ended up with these, just like everybody else, is because the field of vision is big. And so I can look down, and I can also shift my eyes around, and everything is magnified in focus. And so, you know, this particular brand, this was it Donovan or I forget whom, but it's the Optivisor brand, and they're about $45 or $50. So they're not super expensive, but they have 5 or 6 different lens strengths. And it's taken a couple times, you know, the first lens I had did focus about that far away, and I couldn't use it. And then you can pop out the lens and put another lens in there to change and I like when you order this, it tells you the strength of the lens, but it also tells you how far away it focuses. And to me, that's more important because, you know, when I'm, you know, from my nose to where I'm working is about 9 inches or something. And so I don't want something that focuses up here or way out here. So that's what you're talking about, Chris. That sounds really fascinating, but it'd be interested to try it. But be aware that the field of view on a lot of those things, even the imitation ones of these, the copies, I couldn't use.
Josh, what strength are you using on your Optivisor right now? What number is that?
This one I think is this is a 5,
Yeah,
which is a
on the front.
diopter of 2. What's that?
It says on the front.
Yeah, 5.
Yeah.
And then I've got one that's it's actually the next. This one is supposed to focus, I think, at 8 inches or something. I find that good, like when I'm doing a tip plate or something, where I'm working on the nose and the chamfers and stuff. I think it's the 4 is the one that focuses about 10 or 11 inches, which is what I find useful for most things. This little thing, my dad actually gave this to me, and he had this little thing on there which adds. I think I'm going to take it off and leave it off next time because I really don't find it that useful. But yeah, again, this is a relatively new thing in my workshop because I never needed this or never thought I needed it. Just like Vito, it's like all of a sudden you're kind of working and then somebody hands you one and it's like, wow, did I, you can actually see the detail. So
well, it's kind of like when you do something like a head plate, or you do something and you look at it and you're great, and then you take a picture of it and zoom in on it and you're like, oh Lord, I'm not done yet, So, but the other question I had related to this, specifically eyesight, is I find lighting to be a huge issue in my shop. And if you come in and look at my shop, everyone has one, the violin makers have like one bench light over their bench. If you come to my shop, I've got 4. I've got a bench light. I've got one of the dental ones with the magnifying glass in the middle. I've got a small light over the top of my rehair bench, and one of the IKEA goosenecks also on the other side of my bench. And I find I need a lot of light to work. Is there a certain light that you guys use that you found to be particularly beneficial over another?
Ulf has his hand up.
Hello. When I connect my work as being electrical engineer for some years, and we talked about lighting because I was really interested in light, and they talked about like when you're 20 years compared with when you're 40 years. 40 years need normally double light, and then when you go to 60, you need double light again. So that's kind of something that we need to cope with coming age. But I think with the lighting, I think lighting is really good when it comes a lot, but also comes a lot in the roof that spreads out like I shouldn't say heaven, but if it comes a lot of light in the roof, you have a ground lighting that is good, and then of course you have your spot lighting. I do have ordinary bulbs, but now in LED, and that is I will go here. I do still use kind of this lamp, which is about 100 VAT. 100. Do I say watt? 100 watts comparable, but with LED light. That helps spotlighting at every workbench. So that's my input here.
Thank you.
What I like to say is that it's good to have good lighting, but you don't want to overwhelm the light because you need shade as well, like shadow. Shadow is very important when you're working with a tip or making a bow, because you need to actually see shadows on the curves. So direct lighting is important. Something that you can move around. I have this thing here, which it has turn it off. It has a dual, and I have that in every single bench that I use. I can use this.
That's exactly what's hanging over right here. One of those.
I love these. I love that. I found I think I found an auction here that was selling like 10 of these, and I bought all 10, like for $50. And I said, if one breaks, I just throw it out and get them.
I want to add to that, Vito. This is the lamp. that has a ring in it and stuff.
Yeah.
Years ago, I got a couple from an art supply, and I thought they were expensive at like $75 a piece. But they got really hot and the switches burned out in the heads, and I still use the gooseneck on other things.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, this is made by Luxo, Luxo, and it was like $300.
Wow.
But it's never had a problem, never overheated. So just like any tool, a good investment in a lamp is needed. I do need to kind of wrap things up. We are running out of time. This has been a fabulous discussion, and we could go on and on. I'm sure, and I'm sure we will in our conversations and messages in the future. But as we wrap up, does anybody have anything they just want to add before we need to leave?